Okay, well, I decided I was going to try my hand at a cathedral window quilt top. I'm going to link below a couple of videos that made me feel inspired to try this type of quilt top. And I also want to say to anyone who's watching this video and you're new to sewing, you're new to quilting, and you're wondering how to get things right or perfect, especially on the first round or your first shot at doing something. And I would say to free yourself of that expectation. I purchased these charm packs. They're called Family Tree. I bought 3 of them, and I thought that these were pretty enough to be used for something like cathedral windows. This is another mini quilt project that I intend to hang on my wall, and I don't know how this is going to turn out. I am not expecting perfection, but I am hoping that I learn a lot of good skills and techniques by going through this process. And I feel like every quilting sewing project that I do, I learn something new. It becomes a new feather in my cap, and it's something that I take with me as I move on to the next project. Some things I do adjust to what I like, or I trial a different way of accomplishing a goal to see if it helps me to achieve the look that I'm trying to go for on the project that I'm working on. One of the things, or a few things that I will share with this project, I used a charm pack for this, and I made my squares I just made half triangles by folding the squares. I thought that the clapper was incredibly helpful in this project. I did try 2 different types of glues. I tried the Soline glue, and I also tried the precision glue. I think that to glue down these triangles to the squares, you need quite a bit of glue, and then you need to use your iron to help set that glue. Some people who make their cathedral windows in a similar fashion will simply stitch their triangles to the square, and I don't think that that's a bad idea. Okay, I did kind of get in a rhythm with the glue, and it worked for me. But just know, as you explore YouTube or TikTok, or you might read in blogs or on Reddit, there are a lot of ways to do this type of quilt top. Some that use more fabric, some ways that use less. Okay. But everything that I bought for this particular project was dedicated to getting this project accomplished. So I wasn't really using scraps or anything like that. Some lessons that I learned, I think in the beginning, one of the biggest lessons is starch. I think it was incredibly helpful when making those half triangles that you want to place onto your squares, to use some starch, to use a clapper, and just to get those nice crisp edges. Now, what I realized was I was holding my fabric, my squares, way too close to my actual bottle when I was spraying the bottle onto the fabric, and it was making the fabric super wet. And you do want the fabric to obviously get the starch on it, but I decided to hold my fabric at least 12 inches or so away from the spray bottle. And then I would do multiple squares at one time, the multiple squares that I knew I was going to turn into half triangles, so that I could let the starch have enough time to kind of soak into the fabric, dry a little bit, and then use my iron to help create those half square triangles, and then use the clapper to help me get that nice crisp edge. Okay. There is a pin that I showed at the beginning of this video quickly. It's a easy press pin, and it helps you to apply that starch nicely within those seams. I just want to kind of notify anybody who's interested in that pin. The pin that I received, either I bought it a while ago and either the starch leaked out or there was no starch in it. I had to put some of my own starch solution in that pin. That's fine. I had plenty of it, so it's no big deal. But just so you know, you'll need to probably pour your own solution into that pin. I really like it though, because you can get your starch solution right on your seam lines. So you don't have to get the rest of the fabric wet when you get to that point in the project. For this particular project, I decided to open up my seams, and you will see that towards the end of this video. Okay, so here we are, and this is kind of the moment that I realized that I was way too close to my fabric with my big bottle of starch, and I was sitting here at this point trying to figure out if I completely messed up these squares. Do I let them sit and dry for a couple of hours? Is there anything that I can do to get this starch to soak into this fabric with a little bit more speed? And ultimately, I decide to just wait a minute or so and then just fold these over and go for it. Fold them into the half square triangles because I didn't want to wait. This is the moment that I made the decision to hold the fabric a little bit further away from the actual bottle of starch that I was using. And as I described earlier, this is when I also decided that I would ultimately end up doing multiple squares and just spraying them with starch so that the starch had plenty of time to soak in and dry, and I could make my half square triangles. You are going to notice that several of my triangles don't fold over perfectly like this one. It is, for the most part, a nice half square triangle, but there seems to be with some of these triangles a little bit of overage, like you have some I can't get it perfect. And I tried to see if I could get away with that for this project. Like, how exact do those triangles have to be? And yes, with sewing and quilting, being exact, being perfect is very, very, very important. But what I've started to do is kind of question if, when I notice an imperfection, if I think it's within the seam allowance. So like, I'm going to stitch over that area and you might not notice it anyway. I will sometimes try to see if I can get away with that and still achieve the desired result. At the end of the day, it may be, no, you can't get away with that for this particular project or look that you're trying to achieve. You need this to be perfect. But for my first round my first time attempting cathedral windows, I kind of wanted to see for myself if I actually needed these to be perfect, or if I could have some slight imperfections in these triangles and still ultimately achieve the look I wanted. Now, you'll also notice that my iron is very little, and I worried about that. Like maybe I purchased an iron that was way too small for these, even for making mini quilt tops. So far, I've been super happy with this particular iron. It's made it very easy for me to open up my seams and get like a nice flat look. I'm trying to also remember some of the rules with ironing. Like if you iron your fabric, you run the risk of stretching it versus pressing your fabric, where you kind of just press down on a particular part and you pick the iron up and then you move it to the next section of your fabric, so that the pressing versus ironing. And I'll see if I can find a couple of videos that I've been watching to kind of help me with that, and link those below. So if you're new to sewing, you're new to quilting, you do want to pay attention to that, because it can stretch your fabric and change the size of the fabric you're working with. And I find also with sewing and quilting, if you're going to make an artistic decision to do something one way or the other, then you probably need to do it all the time. So I guess if you really like the idea of ironing your half square triangles, you should probably iron all of them. And if you just press right where the seam is there to make where at the bottom of the triangle, then you should just do that consistently. I like the idea of pressing my triangle fabric, so that's what I did. With this precision glue, I ultimately made the decision that I wasn't using enough, and so I started using a much more glue than the amount that you see here initially. I also used my Sew Line glue stick. Used it a lot in English paper piecing, and I decided to give it a go with this particular project as well. I would say whatever glue you decide to use, just make sure you're using enough to get the desired result, which is the fabric attaching to whatever you're trying to attach it to, and setting it with your iron. For cathedral windows, some people will just stitch these triangles to the square, and that's fine. I happen to have glue, and so I wanted to try to make that process work. And so you're going to see me in any of the videos I show you with these cathedral windows, really trying to line those windows up onto the square, trying to make sure to remember to use my clapper, making sure that I really hit those seams on the bottom of the triangle so it's nice and crispy, so that when I take those half square triangles and make the flat ends of both triangles meet up on the square fabric, it is as close and flush as possible. And I also want to add, either scroll to the end of this video or watch until the end, because I truly feel like this is one of the prettiest quilt blocks I've ever made. Like, this cathedral windows are absolutely gorgeous to me. And I'm thinking of so many fabrics that would just look beautiful with this. A lot of cathedral windows, it has the solid background and the color is in the actual window itself. Those are gorgeous. I also think cathedral windows that just have a lot of color in general are beautiful. And I enjoy color. I want to point out too, I have this book. I think it's called the Quilting book. It's pink. It's got a lot of great advice in that book. And one of the things that they talk about is the types of fabric you use and remembering directionality in your fabric. So some of the fabrics that I'm using here, you will notice it actually has a top and a bottom, like the square there in the background. It's got words written on it, and it's actually upside down. For this particular project, that doesn't really bother me too much because I can also just simply fix that by flipping the square and making that square work in a different section so that those words are not upside down. But as I progress in my sewing and quilting journey, especially when I get to the point where I'm wanting to actually gift an item to people or just make something for myself, or maybe one day even enter something into a competition, who knows? I want to make sure I am cataloging that in the back of my brain, that directionality matters a little bit more when the stakes are a little higher, I guess, in those scenarios. But for this to be my first cathedral window quilt top, I was way more fixated on like technique and making sure my angles lined up and making sure that I got that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and making sure that I had a nice square in the center that I could create my window out of. And so that's what I fixated on more than the fabric directionality. Now you'll see here that I'm now focused on opening the seams on the back of these 2 blocks that I pieced together. And I'm going to use my little starch pen, and you have to kind of compress the tip to get the starch to start coming out there. And I opened it up. This is the moment that I realized it was empty. And so I needed to actually pour my own starch into this pen. And again, I don't know if this was either a mistake or this is how it comes. I obviously didn't read the description of the item super close. I just knew that I had enough starch to pour in here and keep it moving, and this would be no big deal. And I accidentally, in the process of pouring starch into that pen, spilled starch on the back of this block, and oopsie, we'll just keep going. Lesson learned. So here I am, just kind of opening up these seams. And, for a while, I was thinking, I don't need a clapper. That seems excessive. That seems like an unnecessary item to buy, especially for me. I'm new at quilting. I'm new at sewing. Do I really need this? Guys, that thing is awesome. I mean, the way it helps you just between ironing and starching and then using that clapper, achieve not those nice, crisp, flat seams, flat edges. It's just a wonderful item to have. They don't cost that much. Some people are doing tutorials on how to basically go to the hardwood store, I guess, and make your own. But consider getting yourself something. Also, I think it's better to put it on a hard surface, like a hard surface to a hard surface. I had it on my little ironing pad here, And at some point, I'll grow up and get a bigger ironing pad. But for now, this will work. Actually, my mother-in-law gave me, she had a couple of ironing boards, and she gave me one. But for the size of this project and for what I'm doing in this moment, I don't think it is necessary to bust out an entire ironing board. So I just stuck with my little ironing pad here. And here I am trying to figure out, is this a good time to use the seam roller, or should I continue to just open with my fingers? I occasionally have tried to use the seam roller, and it just doesn't quite, for me anyway, it doesn't quite work as well as my fingers. And so I just continue to use my fingers for now, and my little starch pen. And here we are again, we're just opening these seams. And I'm still kind of playing with the idea of opening the seams and pressing versus opening the seam and ironing down the whole seam. I don't know what the right answer is. I think, like most art, it's what you like to do, what doesn't distort the fabric too much for you on your end. And something else that I also realized, this is where I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that I'm not using enough glue, that I'm not setting the glue well enough, and then I'm going to have to do something different if I'm going to be able to piece these blocks together well and have these ends meet in a way that works for me and makes this project look pretty. I love these pins, or these are not pins, these little clips here. You can kind of see the pins in the background there behind and to the left of my sewing machine. And I am using a 1/4-inch foot. And my daughter decides she wants to put her little hand in the video. And you will see an Eggo mini box. And I am using that box because for this particular machine, I do not have a bigger table that can attach to the machine and give me more of a sewing surface. So I use that Eggo mini box to hold up the other side of the fabric, which is a little bit heavier because it's got pins, and it doesn't pull my fabric when I am sending it through the machine. It holds it up quite nicely for me. And I've even gotten good enough where I can move the box forward for longer pieces of fabric. So here I am with my sew line, and I'm now, I'm deciding, hey, let's experiment with using that kind of glue and see if it holds the triangles better. I've opened up the seams there, and now I'm focused on getting the second half of the block done. And you can see that this is the bottom part. And the hardest thing I've also had a time with doing the Cathedral Windows blocks is just remembering what side I want to sew on, and where to actually pin my fabric so that I can have a pretty good match between my angles. One of the videos that I linked, one of the ladies emphasizes that the angles that you have, like where your lines meet up, the tips there with your triangles, those are incredibly important. And you need to do everything in your power to make sure that those are matching up. You don't want that to be too far off when you're making your cathedral windows. And so ultimately, I like to pin around my whole block. I like to match up those angles, and then I like to match up the other block ends. I like to make sure that the heights are looking good when I'm pinning those blocks. And then I like to come in with my clips, and then I remove my pins, and I sew based off of my clip. And I think for my first time doing something like this, not too bad. Not too bad. I like to think that I'm a quick study, and so I definitely took a lot of lessons from this to move forward with the other blocks. And so now you see me piecing the two blocks together, the two halves. And I started with the center because I wanted to make sure that the tips matched, but I also wanted to make sure that the line coming through the center of the block, or the intersections of the block, if you will, met in the middle. And I am going to admit that it wasn't always perfect every time I did it. And so that's just a work in progress, and trial and error. And I try to be gentle with myself because this isn't for a grade. But I hope someone who's thinking about starting sewing or thinking about starting on their, quilting journey stumbles on to one of these videos and realizes that there's a lot of us out here. We're learning. We are being very vulnerable in this process. But you're never too seasoned in life. I don't ever feel like you're old. You're just more seasoned. And you're never too seasoned in life to not learn something new. And so I'm showing up every day, most days, just trying, just seeing if I can be better today than I was yesterday. And I am arguably having a lot of fun doing this. So even when I'm very frustrated with something, I feel challenged, and not in a bad way. Like, it makes me just want to show up again and perfect the technique and achieve something really pretty that I can hang up on my wall. And I'm loving going in the fabric stores and looking at fabric. It's taking everything in my power not to have drawers full of fabric that have absolutely no assignment other than to be there looking pretty for when I am ready to actually use them. So you see here how I've pinned. This is what I mean when I say I like to pin all the way around my fabric. I do this with squares, with any kind of block that I'm working on. I try to do this to help get those angles and those lines just so. And then I do it all around. So I'm not just going to do it on the side that I'm going to sew on, but I'm also going to do it on the top. I probably don't put as many pins on the other parts of the piece that I'm sewing, but I like to put something there just to help the fabric not move as much. And I also am still in that phase where I'm sewing on my machine very slowly and learning to watch the fabric, not my needle. So here we are. I'm doing the best I can to get this matched up. Then you see the Eggo box again, because I will say this again, I don't have a table to go with this machine. So I needed something to help me hold up the weight of the squares. And this is what I came up with. And I just stick my clapper inside of the Eggo box to give it enough weight so it doesn't move while I'm moving the fabric on top. And when I get to a certain point on this particular piece that I'm sewing, I will kind of use my arm to push that box forward and keep sewing. I have another sewing machine. She's my Skyline. I call her Olivia. And she does have a table and she has much more sewing space. But I just kind of like to, I just still keep coming back to my basic Janome here. And that's because I'm working with the pedal. My Skyline has a pedal too, but I don't really use a pedal when I use that machine. And I haven't used it often at this point. I still want to gain a level of comfort with this particular machine. And so you'll notice I'm back stitching too. I don't always remember to back stitch. It's still kind of hard to take my finger out and touch that lever. And here you go. This is not bad. Like first time doing that. And I'm showing you here that I need to open up these seams as well. So I'm going to open the seams up on the back, but this is not bad. I was very impressed. So I opened up my back seams and then I didn't stick a window in. And I want to emphasize, this is kind of where like your artistic decisions can come into place. You can put whatever kind of fabric you want in the center here. I guess you could even decide not to put any fabric in there and just go with it how it is. But I mean, I would imagine you would want a very perfect intersection every time. I guess you could even choose to maybe leave the window out and like quilt within that piece, and kind of that was the desired result. I don't know. You could just do so much with this block. I am going to put the window in just to go through the entire exercise of having the window in. I have not decided how I'm going to actually quilt this, but I did want to go ahead, put the window in. And what I'm doing for now, until I piece all of these blocks together, I'm putting the window into each block. And I want to mention, when you do Cathedral Windows and you make your blocks, you actually, as you do your rows, you create other windows. And watch a couple of the videos that I've linked. That statement will make sense. So I'm thinking somewhere between 6 to 8 blocks that I'm going to make, and we're going to have so many windows by doing that. I have not decided how I'm going to quilt this exactly. I guess that's the fun of it. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here, doing this project, but that's okay. This is not for a grade. And that's a very important point to emphasize. We're supposed to have fun with this, and we are sharing this and hopefully motivating other people to give it a shot. So here we are. And I was just, at this point, admiring this block. I think this is so pretty. And it just looks nice. See you later.